Good day, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our Healthy Minds speaker series. And this is part of our Maple Leaf You Are Not Alone mental health commitment. I'm Peter Neufeld, VP of Leadership. And thank you for joining us today as we all experience something a little new, and I trust will be an enjoyable time for you. We've all seen there's a lot written in the media and from experts around the impacts of COVID on mental health. And, paying attention to this and with this understanding, we wanted to explore in terms of what we could actually do for our Maple Leaf community. And so this is the first in a series, a weekly series that we're going to be running and having different speakers come in and a chance for us to connect. Our intention is that through these times, you're going to be able to learn something, be able to learn some different skills that will help you, that you'll be able to easily apply very quickly. We're hoping also that it'll be a chance to recharge your batteries. We all have so much going on, and having a break in the middle of the week can just be a great chance to be able to do that. And further, this is the first time that we're actually involving all of Maple Leaf in a call like this. So everyone across all of Maple Leaf has been invited to these sessions. And I think that in itself is going to be really interesting and I trust rewarding as we get a chance to connect in this way. So I'll jump in terms of what the format is that we're going to have. The sessions are going to be pretty brief. So the sessions are 30 minutes, and we're going to structure it in terms of roughly, we'll have the first half, we'll bring in different mental health experts who will talk on different topics that are really relevant to what we're experiencing now. The second half is really going to be a chance for a Q&A. We want to hear from you. I think all of us are kind of craving a connection, and this will be a chance for us to hear from you, the questions that are on your mind. I'm going to actually, because we're a big group, I'm going to talk about the technology to do that now. So at the top right-hand corner of your screen, you should see the silhouette of a person, I think with their hand up, and a little question mark. And if you have a question, please submit it there, and we'll be going through them. And then in the second half of our time today, we'll be pulling from those and have a chance to answer some of those questions. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker. And I'm really pleased that we're able to have Dr. Bill Howatt join us today. Bill is a psychologist. He's a very well-published mental health expert and speaker. And I'm sure probably a lot of you have even seen his articles in the Globe and Mail. And it's quite timely. He was also a participant in a multi-year running project called the Loneliness Project. I think he is highly skilled to be able to talk to us today on our topic of coping with isolation and loneliness. So with this, we're going to actually jump in. And I'd just like to say welcome, Dr. Howatt. Thank you for joining us today. And over to you.
Thank you. Okay, Sean, so you can put up the first slide for me, the cover slide. Thanks, sir. All right, everybody, welcome and thank you for coming. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes, and what I want to do is start with a frame of reference of what isolation and loneliness is. And the frame of reference I'm going to go through that's important I appreciate Peter's introduction. One of the things I want to make sure that you're really clear about is my background's somewhat unique and a little bit different. I have a different view on this than some other people might have. I'm the kid who grew up in Halifax. I spent my first few years of my life in a foster home. And I'm the kid that went to Prince Edward Island, where I was raised as a maritimer. And my father was a bartender for 50 years, most important person in my world. And why I'm telling you that and sharing that for you is that we're going to have people in all different stages of their life and all different levels. And I lived my entire life with a mental health issue, and I've supported people my entire life with a mental health issue. And before COVID-19, the concept around isolation and loneliness were big issues for many people, approximately between 20 and 25% of the population. Today, lots of people are struggling. Let's talk about the concept for a moment. As a person that spends time working with people with mental health, I know that everybody before the thing started had a certain amount of life stress. You had your money, you had your career, you have your relationships, and you have your other challenges, your physical health, and all those demands are on top of you. What happens is, just so you have a frame of reference as I get into this, isolation, so you understand what isolation is. Isolation is referring to barriers that could actually keep us away from our ability to actually interact and socially connect and relate to people. Now, all our different situations, life, we've got many different things that are going on. COVID-19 for some people meant that they may stay home. For you that are essential workers are still working means you still need to go to work. However, there's a perceived barrier for many people that this is creating some challenges. Loneliness is the byproduct of the absence of having meaningful social connections that meet your needs. It's very subjective, and each of us will have different perceptions. As I get into this conversation, what I'd like you to be aware of is keep in mind that no two people are going to look at the situation the same way. So what I also want you to know is that for us is the more we can be non-judgmental about ourselves and give ourselves a break, we're in an ordinary and unusual period of time. So if we go to the next slide. Thank you. As Peter, I'm going to build on it. Peter talked about this kind of thinking about this as a battery. Really quickly, what I want you to think about every day, think about yourself as a battery. Every day, what are the things that you're doing that are charging your battery, and what are the things that you're doing that could be draining your battery? And what are the things in the environment that could be charging your battery and draining your battery? So, for example, challenges in a relationship could be draining a battery. Playing with your granddaughter or seeing children could charge your battery. Things that you can do with intention that can charge your battery. You might, whether it's going for a walk, playing with a pet, etc. What we want to do in this series is keep it uplifting and have an opportunity for you to be aware that all of us are a finite resource. And the part of I've learned around human behavior, regardless of where your mental health falls, I'm going to continue, moves back and forth all the time. And it can bounce from where we can feel we're flourishing and everything's going well, where we're having a hard day. That's kind of normal with the human being, and it's really important to understand. We've not taught human beings that there's good days and there's bad days, and that everything in between is how we negotiate. This concept of isolation and loneliness for some people is draining their battery. For other people, they're thriving and doing great. And if you're one of those people who are doing great, that's super. Provide encouragement for other people and realize that lots of people right now may need an open hand and support. And by talking to other people and checking in, that can be really, really helpful. So with that, what we're going to focus on is what can you do in regards to charging your battery in the concept of isolation and loneliness. Next slide. So if you can build this slide, to build on the point, to give you a picture in your head what we're talking about, no, back one, thank you, is you'll see on the left where it says perceived isolation. Now, if you're looking at this or listening at it, what I'm talking about is there's all these different barriers that you can have in your life that could be draining your battery. Now, some of it could be a perceived workload. Lots of people feel they have a lot more workload since they're trying to be at home now, learning how to work with new technology, learning how to reprioritize, learning how to keep up to their demands of their job. So there could be these things that become barriers, and these barriers still can be draining our batteries. Our financial health, some people worry about that. School, social distancing, the rules, how far I have to be away from, all these things that become barriers. Well, how we deal with those barriers and how we're coping with those barriers will impact our perceptions, whether we feel lonely or not. Loneliness, again, is a perception. What I want you to be aware of, though, loneliness is an emotive element. Perceived isolations are things that we think that are happening. And what's interesting in this series, the opportunity for you as you're going through this, as Peter and the team takes you through this, is that what it's about really ultimately to be able to help keep your mental health positive as you can, because your mental health is like physical health. You can exercise, diet, rest, and relaxation to build your mental health. But like the G.I. Joe fallacy, just knowing is not half the battle. Actually doing something and taking action. Most human beings do not know what the algorithm for mental health is. It's physical health, it's mental fitness, and social connection. So today we're focusing on one pillar of mental health, is bringing to a level that you're not alone. The thematic behind this is you're not alone. So you'll see coping, less effective, effective. And what we're looking at, trying to come up with ideas, which I'll give some tips in a minute, are things that you can do to help you build social connections and keep those in tight so that you reduce your risk for feeling isolated or alone. That's the goal for doing this conversation for you. Again, giving you a frame of reference so that you can understand, what am I doing to charge my batteries, knowing why many people in Canada, up to 50% now, are struggling with social connections and isolation based on a study that came out in national media. So that's why we're bringing this conversation to let you know you're not alone and pathways to get that. Next slide, please. Now you'll see there's a lot of bubbles here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I just want to make a point. I'm in Ottawa right now doing this talk with you. I'm being in social isolation by myself for 5 weeks. My challenge is being by myself working is that before COVID-19 and after COVID-19, I had different challenges. But now that I'm alone, if I think about it, okay, now before COVID-19, I would have the opportunity to go out and start seeing people. I had freedom and I had the ability to move. Now I need to work in a different framework. And because before I could do that, now I don't have that. What we want you to be aware of, if you think about the difference before COVID-19 and after COVID-19, what are those barriers that are draining your particular battery, and think about what the actions are you can take to start to mobilize resources. Now, for you, as you think about this, these are conversations, as you're having these conversations with yourself and with your family, lots of you perhaps are connecting more with other people, which we'll talk about. One of the big things that's important is being clear of the strategies that you're working with intention that are helping you build the relationships that you want and to maintain. But keep in mind, the absence of social connections is what drives people feeling lonely. And you're not alone in this, and we're going to reinforce that by getting people to ask questions, talk. So as you get to the point when as we're going through this, we're going to start a question period in a couple minutes. I'm going to go through some tips. Is start to ask some questions that we can have a conversation with you to help give some ideas that can be personalized to your situation, because we don't want to assume that everybody's having the same experience dealing with isolation and loneliness or supporting it and the challenges with it. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to give you just 4 tips in this period of time, and we could follow up and give you a couple other ideas, and I'll talk to Peter about it. However, what we want you to become aware of is this. If we think about those barriers around isolation, what's neat is Peter and I could be in the exact same situation and see these two situations completely different. My self-talk, what's important for you to understand, the automatic thoughts that come up and the things I think about, they may or may not be true under pressure. And so be careful what your self-talk is, what you're saying to yourself. And if you start to identify some of your negative self-talk, that could be creating barriers. That's why we try to encourage people, because what happens is most of our thoughts are unconscious. And so we can train our brain, believe it or not, by us being mindful about self-talk. So if our self-talk is positive and we're in positive conversations, that can become infectious. We want you to be mindful of the conversations you're in. If you're worried, that's normal. If you're feeling anxious, that's normal. But your self-talk may create limits and make barriers bigger than they are. So think about being positive. Second point, you're not alone. Now, the fact that your organization is doing this and your senior leadership want to have this conversation, that's a first step for them to actually put out the olive branch and say, hey, we're here. We know you all have unique needs. We don't know what all your needs are, but we're here to support, and we need you to help us learn how to help you and support you. The team, I've got a chance to see some of the resources. I work all across the country. I'm also the chief of research at the Conference Board of Canada, and I can tell you from my study and looking at it, I'm very impressed with the fact that they're taking the time now to engage you in this conversation, so you're not alone. Leverage your support systems. Now, the support systems of people you have in your network that you can talk about. Now, I was talking to Peter before this, and he made comment about this because his background, he used to do a lot of work with people, counseling as well, and he understands this. We know that some of you, if you're struggling, may not be able to advocate for yourself. You may have questions, you might be shy, you might be concerned. There's all kinds of different medias, from phone to online to resources, etc., to get you different support if you have questions, if you're struggling. Family, if you have family, friends, high school, this is a time to be reaching out and talking to people. What I'm finding amazing, a lot of people are talking to a lot more people than they have in a long time. Meetings these days seem to be different. People are checking in, how are you doing? Checking in and getting to know each other. I can't understate how important it is at this point in time to know that you're not alone. Talk, talk, talk. We're in an unprecedented period of time. However, one day at a time, we're going to get through this. Will be another side of this, and we will find what the new normal is. But we need to do it with intention and understand it's going to be a process. We will get frustrated. We will learn those. Whenever there's change, that's normal. And the last point, and then I'll open it back to you, Peter, is be clear. Loneliness is a feeling. It's not a fact. Meaning, it's when I start to feel lonely, that's a normal response because my perception of my needs for social relationships, whether it's work, my community, my partner, or my family. I could be in a marriage and feel lonely. The perceived barrier might be what I'm thinking about. What we want you to be aware of now, there's all kinds of different stresses and challenges, things that help us retract and make it harder for us to interact. It's great if you start to explore what those are, and if you're not sure, have conversations, because maybe a lot of people that you know are processing and going through the same thing. I'll say the last thing, Peter, and I'm going to hand it to you to engage, is I think lots of us are doing okay, and I think some of us are having a hard time, and I think some of us are learning a new normal. The more we are aware that we're in this together, and we pause and take a moment for each other, you'll be surprised how we can start to leverage these social connections to help charge other people's batteries. So picking the phone up, calling people, asking them how they are, doing check-ins, that's all positive behaviors for everybody to support each other. Go ahead, Peter.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Howatt. I'm going to remind people in terms of how to access the questions. So you'll see the icon in the top right. And some of the questions that I'm seeing come in already is really about how to kind of change from, you talked about the challenge is actually doing. And so one question is around self-talk. How do you manage the self-talk? How do I become more positive and ignore the demons? And that's
an excellent question. A couple things I'll say to you is to get to that. One of the things is real quick, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to give you something. Whenever we have a difference between what we want in our life and what we have, what happens is we can't solve the problem here. It's like a switch flips and we go to here. When we get caught in our emotional brain, our old part of our brain, whatever thoughts come up, I'm not doing good, I can't handle it. The problem is we have lost our cognitive ability when we're caught in our emotional state. One really proven way to help us is step one is starting to challenge thoughts. So if you name a thought, I'm having a negative thought, so geez, I don't like that, I don't like that thought. It's just to start to name the thought, and then if you, at the end of the day, take 3-4 minutes and journal and start writing your thoughts out. It's kind of like if you probably had an experience where you send an email and then the next day you read it and go, oh my God, did I really send that email? So sometimes we, in our state, will think things and we can start to actually create an ability to start to challenge it. The other thing about positive self-talk that's important to be able to think about is actually what you're actually loading up. Those demons, if you're struggling with it, in other words, we can do a whole one of these in 15 minutes it's called flipping the switch, a strategy of how to help you flip the switch and give you different techniques. So rushed a little bit here because I want to give you a couple ideas of journaling, naming a feeling, knowing that just because you think it doesn't mean it's true, and not empowering it. I just did actually one on anxiety today for the Conference Board of Canada, which are free on anxiety. So Peter, I could send that out to give somebody a tip on how that's. I'd spent 10 minutes or so explaining that. Might be able to give some more context, and I can give you a tool too on getting to positive thought that we create in the Global Mail.
So I think what you've described is excellent. Before I get to the next question,
sure.
What I've heard come up a number of times is we're reading and hearing lots of good advice, but it's really hard to get to that tipping point to actually do these things. Do you have any advice to actually take like this great idea on journaling and help people to actually make sure that they translate it into something that they do today or do tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, what that answer that is really putting it higher in your value system and actually understanding from behavioral economics what our problem is. Most of us will do the following. We know that if we eat healthy tomorrow, save for the future, we know what the outcome is. But we discount the present value of how we feel. So, for example, real quickly, I want to lose weight. I need to get on a Stairmaster. The pain of doing the Stairmaster is an 8. I get on the Stairmaster. I know I'm not going to get shredded ribs today, and I'm going to look awesome after one workout, which, you know what I mean? And so it's a 6. But tomorrow it's a 10, so I'll do it tomorrow. So we have a tendency to kick things down the road. The challenge when you add a new behavior, and Peter brings up a fantastic thing, is adding that behavior, expecting an immediate return is not going to happen. It's like doing anything. It's like getting on a treadmill. But once you do it with discipline and make it valuable and do it, give it a, don't get attached to immediately the outcome, but go through the process. I can tell you after doing this for 30 years, people that follow these micro skills and follow them within 2-3 weeks, even mindfulness by focusing on breathing, which you could do another one on, Peter, is that you can get benefit from a 2-minute mindful breathing or 3 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing for anxiety within a week or two if you just learn to put it higher in your value. It's patience, though, Peter. It's about patience and trusting the process.
No, thank you. So we're getting a number of questions, so thanks everyone for bringing them in.
Awesome.
A theme that I'm noticing now is around how we actually check in with our colleagues. And in terms of checking with colleagues, because we're limited to voicemails and emails, and the other is, where does vulnerability fit in terms of now we're actually, kind of exposing ourselves potentially with our colleagues. Do you have any advice on that?
Absolutely. So what's important when we're our role, understand first of all our role. So my role for you to role model, if I want to check in with you, I can say, hey, Peter, I know we're in a tough time. I just want to check in and to see how you're doing. Now, what happens is, Peter gets a chance to be vulnerable and say, oh, I'm doing great. But if Peter's not doing great, that could be because he doesn't have the trust and relationship. But if Peter trusts me and have a relationship, how are you really doing? And Peter says, I'm doing okay. So Peter, I'm here. I can have a chat with you. Now, here's what's interesting. If Peter's struggling and having a difficult time, it's understanding where the line is where you can say to Peter, sounds like you're really having a hard time, struggling. Have you ever thought about talking to someone that's trained professionally to help this? I can support you, but I'm not trained. Because what happens is if you start trying to take other people's challenges on, you think you might be helping yourself. But what happens is I spent 30 years getting trained in this kind of stuff. So what happens, I don't take it on. And I also don't end up creating, because sometimes what happens is a conversation can stir someone else up. What your role is a peer support, to know that you're there to support and to care. Your job is to listen, not to sit there and provide a whole lot of advice. If you listen, if I'm listening to Peter, so how can I help? He tells me, so what's going on? What's hard for you? But I'm just going to let him talk. I said, Peter, is there anything you need to do? Are you worried? Are you struggling? And you can go back and forth. So this is what I'm doing. What are you doing? Or Peter can say, I feel trapped or bored. We can have a normal conversation. But if Peter starts talking about, well, I'm really having a hard time with my wife and we're fighting, we're angry all the time, or my kids are driving, you can work with inside a realm, but use your instincts. When you start to feel like you're concerned about Peter, this is time for us to be actually say, hey, Pete, we have an EAP program. They're really, really good. And they're caring people, and they can help you, because I want to be your friend and support system. Does that make sense to you, Peter?
Yeah. No, thank you very much. There's a question here that's come up, and it says, I've stopped watching the news because it makes me anxious. I now focus on what I can control, staying in, social distancing. Is this approach okay, or should I find more balance?
No, I actually think it's fantastic. I think what happens is that they're going to find out what they need to know from you. So if there's a whole lot of major change in the world, and they don't need to know how many people died today. They don't need to know all that. What they need to know is if you go outside, as we talked before, I'm a big proponent now of wearing a mask for your protection. hand washing, keeping your hands away. Your physical distance stays at not, I'm going to recommend not 2 meters, but 3 meters. We're talking about expanding that. If you're outside and you're jogging and running, keep more distance because of molecules and how they're moving. I'm a big proponent on actually doing as much positive script as you can. It actually drains your battery. Things that are draining your battery, you can choose to stop them, and things that charge your battery, that's what you want to do. I think what you're doing is amazing. They could probably do a little 15-minute one for you because that's good coaching.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to one that's kind of come up, and it's come up a number of times, so I want to highlight it. But it's this idea that people can feel weak if they ask for help and support. Yeah. And, you know, just for that line alone, do you have any comment in terms of reframing or thoughts on feeling weak if you ask for support?
Well, I think that's really important. That's stigma. At the core of stigma, that we have 3 types of stigma. There's self-stigma, what I think I'm supposed to be. There's peer stigma, and there is cultural stigma. What will the bosses think of me? Will they label me as being weak? What we want to do is remove the word weak. I'm doing work with CSIS, first responders. I'm doing studies on operational stress injuries. I work with the military, JTF. I work with all kinds of people. Every one of us are vulnerable. Every one of us. It depends on how our stress load is. What your folks are doing right now is the start of the key. By having conversations, males don't typically feel comfortable in these conversations because they believe from old scripts. Females typically, for example, will attend more programs, go to more programs because they're more comfortable with their emotions. What we need to do is have these conversations over and over and over and realize that we can tell you it's safe. The conditions of it will happen through your experience. That's important. But the vulnerability piece of it, every time I've ever seen a patient in 30 years, it takes a certain amount of courage and trust in the system that we're there to really care. And you don't even, if you come to see, you don't know who I am. So I still have to earn your trust. So trust and getting support is an important part of it. But I think, Peter, this conversation around vulnerability is to continue to have it.
Yeah.
Don't stop talking about this, because that's, you're trying to get rid of stigma. And living my entire life with a mental illness, I'm 6'2", 240 pounds, play university football. I'm a walking accommodation. I've learned that when I went to Wall Street, became a chief of staff in a very large financial organization, the CEO asked me, because I was ADHD, he said, you know, a question about, you know, why you, blah, blah. I went through it. But what he really appreciated was became very comfortable, because I'm a bartender's son, is I can't be someone else. I'm not. I only can be who I am. That's learning to get comfortable in our own skin.
I love what you said in terms of the idea of it takes courage for people to be vulnerable. And I think that kind of view can really frame up the conversation for us to receive people and respect their courage for acting, even when there's fear.
Good point.
So, folks, this is our first, like I say, of a weekly series. There's so many questions here, and unfortunately, we're not obviously able to get to them all. What I will say is we're going to be taking these questions back, and they're going to inform future weeks and conversations that we're going to have. I'd also encourage you, for these sessions, feel free to invite your family to join you. Chances are they're living with you, and they're probably just in the other room. So don't be shy in terms of having them be a part of it. And our hope is that we'll actually become a forum for you to have conversation, and who knows where that helpful dialogue can go. In terms of supports, so the work that we're doing here, we're going to be giving you tips and tools, but if you feel that you need to speak to a professional, please go to our online resources. We've highlighted them before. One that you can go to is inkblottherapy.com/mapleleaf, but you can just go online. But again, inkblottherapy.com, you can find more information, or you can find it out through HR or through our internet site. The last thing that I want to highlight at this time is we really want this to be a conversation. And, you know, we're looking, as I say, doing this over many weeks, and we want to know what's on your mind and what you'd like to hear about. So please don't hesitate. I would love to hear from you. So to keep it simple, again, I'm Peter Neufeld. Just shoot me an email and let me know what's on your mind. And we're going to make this very much a user experience that will inform, you know, the other speakers that we have come. Dr. Howatt, I want to give you a big thanks for kicking us off. This is just fantastic, and it's such a good start, and I really appreciate it.
Take care. All the best, everybody. Good luck.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.